When you talk about unmasking, what exactly are you inviting leaders to explore?
So there was a bit of debate and thinking around the title of the book, and that's how we zeroed down on the word unmasking because my experience over the years that I have been training leaders has been that uh, leaders need to sometimes shed the protective layers of uh, the projected leadership that they are wearing.
You speak about sustainable leadership.
Yeah,
Now, often leaders confuse sustainability with simply lasting longer or being resilient.
yeah.
From your perspective, what differentiates sustainability in leadership from resilience or endurance, and how can leaders cultivate that in practice?
Yeah. True, these are some terms that are confused, and people tend to use them interchangeably, while that is not the case. So, resilience is the ability to bounce back. Resilience is the ability to face the challenges, and even though you are failing or you are struggling or the challenge is way too much, for example, the COVID times or the crisis that happened during the pandemic, the ability to bounce back is what resilience is all about. On the other hand, endurance is about pushing through. And the concept of strategic transparency comes from the point that, and this was very personal to me because when I was younger and had really good leaders leading me in large organizations that I was a part of for a few years, I saw that oftentimes the leader shares with you the task that needs to be accomplished, the goals that have to be accomplished by you as an individual or as a part of a team. But oftentimes they do not bother to share with you the big picture. And so you are left basically without a context.
Hi, I'm Honey Thakur, an executive coach for leadership transitions. And with me today is Marut Bhardwaj, the author of the book Leadership Unmasked. Welcome, Marut.
Thank you.
To introduce Marut, she's an alumni of IIM Kozhikode and University of Leeds. She's been associated with potential project on global leadership programs, and she's experienced in leadership consulting and organization transformation. So, Marut, first of all, congratulations on Leadership Unmasked.
Thank you so much.
The title itself is very intriguing. Let's start there. When you talk about unmasking, what exactly are you inviting leaders to explore?
Thank you, Honey. And thank you, Book Nerds Agency, for having me on the podcast. That's a great question to start with. Unmasking, yes. So there was a bit of debate and thinking around the title of the book, and that's how we zeroed down on the word unmasking because my experience over the years that I have been training leaders has been that uh, leaders need to sometimes shed the protective layers of the projected leadership that they are wearing, and so it becomes sort of like a facade of invulnerability. I am invincible, I am this hero who knows absolutely everything and can conquer the world. So that's the image that they somehow sense that they need to carry. So the roles and the jargon that they need to work with tends to make them mask their true authentic self. So the word unmasking is primarily about the authenticity and sort of coming home to who you truly are.
Absolutely. So I often notice a lot of leaders, wearing what they call the success mask and
Mm,
projecting competence while hiding their vulnerability. So essentially, what you're inviting them or giving them permission to do is step into authenticity, which is powerful itself.
So I was just going to share an example because I have seen
Sure.
leaders that I have truly seen leaders, and especially over the last decade when I worked more in the human leadership space, I have seen these leaders who excel not because they are perfect, but because they are vulnerable and approachable. And so people feel this sense of comfort around them and therefore are willing to go beyond just the call of duty and really bring all of themselves to their teams and their organizations. So that is the kind of impact it can have when the masks come off and the true selves shine.
Okay. So, which brings me to an observation. The way you've structured the book, there's 6 sections here, right? And you've tried to, address 30 myths. This really gives it breadth and depth. So, I'm interested to know, how did you choose these 30?
That's a brilliant question, and that's sort of like the behind the scenes of this book, because when conceived the concept, it was called The 100 Myths.
Okay.
And then as I started working on them, I felt 100 was way too much for somebody to consume and really make sense of. So I cut that short to 50, and then eventually I settled for 30 sharp ones. And the way I selected these 30 myths was basically, it was the concepts and thoughts that were pervasive in the boardrooms globally, because I got the opportunity to work with Accenture, Unilever, Bosch, BCG, and the likes. And so I got the opportunity to see exactly what was happening with the leaders, not in terms of just the projection that they were making, but also internally. And then the myths that silently damaged the organization. Now, we worked with multiple organizations where we saw that at the face of it, everything is fantastic. But when you look closer, you see people are severely burnt out. Or there is a fear level so high that nobody is willing to express themselves independently because they feel badly judged. So they will not open their mouth unless they feel really, really safe. So fundamentally, there was a lack of psychological safety in the organization. Now, these were not recognized as the actual lapses, but what was visible was that the team is not bonding sufficiently, that we are not getting the kind of excellence that we are hoping for. We are doing the regular work, but we are not getting the level of innovation that we are looking for. So the challenges that the organization was understanding was based more on the outcomes, and the myths are actually the reasons or the underlying challenges because of which those are the outcomes. And so I leaned in on both the practice and the research. I leaned into the client conversations that we had, the global leadership data, of course, that educated my thought process around it, and my own experience as I watched the leaders and myself grow as a leader over the years. So these myths are like the invisible operating system of the leaders, which surfaces from time to time, and you are able to then see that they are struggling to project something and not really be themselves.
Absolutely fascinating. The invisible operating system. So let's deep dive into a few of the key themes here. I'm looking at section 3, and what stood out to me in this section was that you speak about sustainable leadership.
Yeah,
Now, often leaders confuse sustainability with simply lasting longer or being resilient.
yeah.
From your perspective, what differentiates sustainability in leadership from resilience or endurance, and how can leaders cultivate that in practice?
Yeah. True. These are some terms that are confused, and people tend to use them interchangeably, while that is not the case. So, resilience is the ability to bounce back. Resilience is the ability to face the challenges, and even though you are failing or you are struggling or the challenge is way too much, for example, the COVID times or the crisis that happened during the pandemic, the ability to bounce back is what resilience is all about. On the other hand, endurance is about pushing through. So when the challenges become too big, how can you push right through rather than just going into that numb state where you start believing that we can't really do anything now?
Yeah, and giving
So
up.
persevering, yes, so persevering through the challenges. That is what endurance is about. And sustainability is about creating a rhythm that prevents burnout in the first place. So instead of trying to do a whole lot, which is beyond your emotional, physical, and mental strength, uh, you set up a consistent rhythm in a manner that allows you to stay on top of the curve for a way longer time. And it has been scientifically proven that when you are working at your top peak, you tend to hit a plateau after a while. Even if you continue to do work at your peak performance, you will after a point hit a plateau, and then the downfall starts. So you need to set a rhythm where you still have reserve energy to perform at your best. So leaders who pace themselves are able to create the space to nurture trust and create the psychological safety that people are looking for in their environment, and not just the survive pressure. Because what happens is, if you're giving it that big push as a leader, it feels like you are getting big results, but they are short. And a leader needs to have the ability to toggle between the short term and the long term. So, in leadership, it is really critical to have a decade view rather than an annual view as well. So at an employee level, at team level, people are thinking in terms of what are my goals this year, what do I have to achieve, what are the priorities. But as a leader, the leader needs to think about what is the decade going to be like, what are we headed towards, what is it that we are wanting to be. So if you push all your energy into the system right at the point A, then very unlikely that you will be able to sustain yourself till the point Z.
I
So that's where
agree.
the sustainability comes.
I agree. I mean, it's less about stamina. And as you say, it's more about the rhythm that you get, knowing when to accelerate, when to pause. And I believe executive leadership is all about perspective. If you have the longer vision in mind, and then you know how to get things done.
Absolutely.
So spot on with this. This also ties in beautifully to the section 4 that you have here, where you write about boundaries. Now, as Indian leaders, many of us are actually raised to, with the idea of conformity, being accessible, open, and even to the extent having that seamless kind of presence for your teams. So, how do your insights on boundary setting and the paradox within, fit in into the cultural conditioning?
Yeah.
And what does a healthy balance for an Indian leader look like?
Eventually, I would like to say that leadership is just the same all over the world. Yes, we do have our cultural nuances within each country, and you're right. In
Mhm.
India, you have to be available all the time. You have to be there, etc. But the leaders need to understand the difference between availability and commitment. It does not necessarily equate, in the sense that, you know oftentimes leaders understand it like this, that if I have commitment towards my work, I always need to stay available for it. But this constant accessibility actually erodes focus and presence, and focus is the most critical thing in success. To be able to succeed at anything, the leaders need to have sharp focus. And so it is important for the leaders to be open and available, but do it with intent. So have a sense of, I am here for you in case there is a challenge. I would like to be available to address that. But at the same time, have the discipline with time. And the discipline in time goes beyond just your meetings and sessions, etc., but also it needs deep work. It needs those performance pauses where you can recoup your energy and your mental strength to tackle the challenges that you need to. So Be disciplined with your time as a leader and clearly say, this is when I can give you my best attention. So no point making those 10 minutes available when the leader is so mentally occupied that really you are sitting in front of a person, your laptop is open, you're looking at your emails, you are getting a phone call in the middle, or you're looking at your messages, and you're also trying to understand the big challenge that somebody is trying to entrust with you as a leader. So it is very important that to understand as a leader that true accessibility is not, it does not mean 24 by 7 availability. It is the quality of your presence that you have as a leader when you do show up for somebody.
Mm.
So
Mm.
that's what I
So,
mean by boundary.
yeah, I get your point when you say, boundaries aren't barriers,
Yeah,
they're actually enablers. And
exactly.
what we're
Wonderfully put.
looking at this is, um, your point actually challenges a deeply ingrained belief in our system, in our context, which says, you have to be available. And the FOMO effect that is getting created with the current generation as well. So, an
Yeah.
interesting point. I'm sure I agree with you. Yes, it leads to burnout. It doesn't give you the mental space. And I have a lot of clients who come to me that they're just having brain fog. They're in the meeting, they're present physically, but mentally they're spaced out. So, yes, an interesting takeaway there as well. Let's define our boundaries around it. So, the next section, section 5, actually spoke to me about the kind of work I do as a coach, the tension between authority and authenticity.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we see so many leaders leaning towards control,
Yes.
micromanaging, and creating that dependency to get
Yes.
to the authority. Now, you're suggesting strategic transformation here,
Yeah.
or strategic transparency as a way forward. Could you unpack that for us? What does it look like in practice, and how leaders can actually manage the risk if they're being open?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a sharp distinction that we have between authority and authenticity. You're right. Authority is all about control, and authenticity is where you are able to create that genuine connection with your team members by being truly
Absolutely.
yourself. And the concept of strategic transparency comes from the point that, and this was very personal to me because when I was younger and had really good leaders leading me in large organizations that I was a part of for a few years, I saw that oftentimes the leader shares with you the task that needs to be accomplished, the goals that have to be accomplished by you as an individual or as a part of a team. But oftentimes they do not bother to share with you the big picture. And so you are left basically without a context. So you know this is what you have to do, but you are not sure how it fits into the larger goals of the organization. So this can actually be multiple levels. It can be your goal as a team versus the organizational goal. It can be your individual goal versus the team goal, etc. So the point that I'm trying to make is that it is important for the leader to share just enough to build trust and kind of autonomy in the individual, but at the same time, not overwhelm them with details that are not of any relevance to them in their role. So, there is a delicate balance that has to be maintained between what you feel is important to share to build trust in the team and also to give them the independence to be able to function effectively, but at the same time ensure that you're not overwhelming the teams with information that is not quite relevant to them for their roles. So, for example, in a transformational project, instead of saying, I'll handle this, a leader said, here's what I know, and here is what I don't know. So, we'll
Mm-hmm.
need to work with what we know and what we don't know, and then together we will try to figure out the unknowns. Now, this is a much more authentic stance than having the authority and trying to project an image of, I know everything that needs to be known, but for your purpose, let's work with this. So
So
that's
it's
the subtle
about
difference.
building that openness, which builds
Exactly.
trust, right? I mean, I
Exactly.
get
Yeah.
what you're saying. What struck me is that you're talking about uh, transparency, and it's not about telling everything. You tell them only what's needed, don't overload. Some leaders love to give more details and scope, etc., but just share what's required to get things done. Yes, an
Yes.
overall vision is required, but you don't have to go into too many details. Let them at least find them out for themselves, create that interest, I would say.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yes. Yes.
Okay. Uh, Another theme which I want to talk about definitely, and it's close to my heart, the quiet strength of true leadership, your chapter 27. It's about charisma. Now, in the world of executive leadership today, everybody is talking about charisma as a celebrated superpower.
Yeah.
So rather than the superpower, is it actually an asset? Is what you're questioning. In what context can charisma become a liability if it's not backed by substance? I'd like your inputs in that.
Yeah. Charisma is important in a leader because it inspires people. It builds energy and it helps to rally people around a vision or around a goal. So, so charisma is the binding force between people and the leader in a way. But it can turn into a liability if it does not come with substance. If there is charisma without substance, that can become more like a manipulation or some sort of a style over substance scenario. And then the teams can become the followers of a personality instead of being the builders of a culture. So that is a fine line that has to be kept in notice, because what can happen is that because of that larger than life personality that the leader has, people are in awe of who the person seems to be as a leader and lose out on the authenticity of that connection, because a leader like that cannot be vulnerable. You can often be enveloped in the ego of your
Or
charisma.
the aura, as they call
Aura.
it.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So think of leaders who dazzle with their oratory skills or their ability to, spellbind the audience with the way they connect, yet leave the organizations hollow. They are,
Mhm.
while they are able to rally the people around themselves, they are not having the impact on the goals and success of the organization as such. So that is where the gap is being identified. So charisma can be a spark, it has its relevance, but it must be coupled with credibility and connection to make it relevant.
Absolutely.
That's
So, what we're saying is charisma can open the door for you, but
yes.
to keep you there and get people interested, substance, which I would simplify as knowledge and experience, is what is
Yes.
needed in the room. And then there's this line from your book that I absolutely loved: brave enough to learn, wise enough to lead. You've been dropping a few very beautiful quotes in the book as well. So I would encourage our listeners to definitely buy the book and go through it for themselves. Each chapter is a nugget in itself. So, referring to this one, brave enough to learn, wise enough to lead, it pushes back against the myth that true leaders never need help or upskilling.
Yeah.
In your experience, how is continuous learning shaping the next generation of leaders or CXOs?
Yeah, I would like to first talk about that's a great question, and I would like to answer in detail. But I want to clarify my image of leadership, how I perceive leadership, which is why I have these points in the book. I feel that for the longest of time there was this hero image that we've been looking at, that warrior, that king right at the front in the war, and
The
on that
night.
white
Yeah.
knight in the shining armor and all of that. That is the image of the leader that we've had. And then came the time when we tried to become more diverse, more inclusive, and leadership became more the metaphor or the image that you get when you think of leadership is now of a circle of people with the leader right in the middle, equal to everybody else, cooperating, co-creating, collaborating, and so on. And I feel post the pandemic, the perception of leadership has completely shifted. And today, my metaphor for leadership is foundation. I feel the leader now is at the bottom, creating the foundation on which the team has to erect the building. So the leader now, instead of being right at the top or in the front, and then moving into the middle and being a part of the entire team, has now come down to create that solid support on which the team can create success. So this has been, yes, this has been the shift in the perception of leadership, and it has been driven in a big way by Gen Z and the millennials, and the young generation of leaders that is now stepping in. And so initially, the thought process used to be that the leader comes ready, the leader arrives with everything that they need. But obviously, that is not true today, right? Today, you have the social media. So, earlier when you had a team of people who needed to be groomed to understand how to lead when they took on those roles, are super adept when they step in today, because the media is really helping them to learn every step of the way rather than waiting until they do a training or read a book. So they are learning every moment all around themselves. We have like a knowledge explosion like never before, actually, if you see. On top of that, there are extreme levels of uncertainty in the environment, be it the geopolitical scenarios or the tech scenarios, where you're talking about AI now coming in and leadership completely changing all over again. The market conditions being as volatile as they are these days. Between all of this, even imagining a leader who's all set and has arrived is really an oxymoron in itself, I feel. So the CXOs have to be, and not just the CEO, but all the top leadership team needs to be perpetual learners. The pace of disruption in today's world makes it mandatory for each leader to continue to upskill themselves, and also at the same time have the humility and the curiosity to upgrade themselves. So even if, for example, I have done the leads course and therefore I have learned how to manage teams, but a lot of them in 5 years time becomes completely redundant, because the new generation of my team is today completely different. What I can do as a leader with AI is completely different from what it used to be 5 years back. So everything is changing on an ongoing basis. So one of the things that is critical is that the leader should have the ability to learn, but I also feel that the leader needs to have the ability to unlearn, because as times change, a lot of what, and that is what the unmasking is about, because we need to take off those masks which made us feel really comfortable within, because I am there, I have everything that I need to be a good leader. But today it is continuously shifting, so we have to take those masks off. We need to understand that if we do not continue to learn, we will become redundant very soon. And with AI, just to give you an example, we were doing some sessions with Unilever on giving impactful feedback to their teams. And one of the key issues was that AI has been accepted by the teams for receiving positive feedback. The team members don't see the need for a human leader to be there to give that input. So, very soon, AI will create the ability to also be able to handle negative feedback just as effectively. Now, what are we as human leaders then supposed to contribute to that? So it is important for the leaders to stay open, and the next generation of CXOs will not be the know-it-alls, they will be the
Let's
learn-it-all
learn it together.
leaders.
It'll be more like let's learn it together. I think the challenge for today's CXOs is creating that culture of curiosity
Yes.
rather than a culture of conformity or perfection.
Yeah,
And that's very important to actually have thriving teams today.
exactly.
This has been such a rich conversation, Marut. Before we wrap up, if you had to leave today's listeners, many of them aspiring or transitioning leaders, with just one myth they must start questioning right away. Out of all that you've written about, just one myth which they need to start questioning immediately, which one would it be?
in a in a large number of organizations, it is believed that when you enter your workspace, you're supposed to leave your emotions outside the door. And
Okay.
that, I think, is a huge myth. That is impossible for a human being to do. So if Marut comes to work inside an organization, she's bringing all of her feelings, her emotions, her pent up anger if she had a fight before she entered. She's bringing the sadness and grief if there is a sick person at home. She is bringing her triggers and patterns that she has collected over years and are completely at a subconscious level out of her control. There are so many emotions that we deal with in our workspace every day. Trying to create an environment where those emotions are completely negated is, I think, the biggest myth that all the leaders need to address. We are humans, emotions are an integral part of who we are. And when we come to work, whether as a leader or as a part of a team, we are going to bring all of our emotions into the scenario. So the leader not only has to have the ability to understand and regulate their own emotions. They also need to have the emotional maturity to work towards the outcome that they need by understanding, recognizing, and regulating the emotions of their team members as well. And that's a huge responsibility that they need to take on.
Absolutely. I mean, that's beautifully stated in a nutshell. Be cognizant of the other people's feelings and emotions while you recognize yours first and you deal with that first. And I also loved your example where you said learning is constant, it has to happen. So you can't fill, overflowing bucket. If the bucket is already full, you can't pour in more. You need to empty it, unmask it, like you said, empty that a bit to allow the fresh water to come in. So
Absolutely.
kudos to you on Leadership Unmasked. It's about unmasking ourselves as human beings first, and lovely connecting with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, honey. Thank you.